You ever seen the movie I Am Legend?
No. Well, I know what it is, but like I never watched it.
Will Smith is the last person in New York. New York got quarantined. He's a doctor trying to find a cure. That's why he stayed behind.
And isn't there like alien looking motherfucker?
Zombie slash vampire kind of mix hybrid because they can't be in the sunlight.
Okay.
And this whole time, since he's alone, he's kind of going insane. And the director was trying to show the audience that he was going crazy. So throughout like the whole like city, he would put mannequins in like different parts of the city, and he would interact with them if they were real people.
Hey! Morning, Marge. Morning, Fred.
Fred.
You guys doing here so early? I'll see you guys inside. Morning, Hank. Midway through the G's. Hey, who's the girl? Never mind. Hey, I'll see you in the morning.
Remember how I told you, remember the Fred doll?
Yeah.
The Fred doll apparently moved by itself. You saw it? That's just in his head.
So we're seeing what he sees.
Yeah.
What the hell are you? No! 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 If you're real, you better tell me right now!
The audience knows that the zombies put the Fred mannequin there, but he's actually going crazy and he thinks that it's actually moving, but it didn't move.
Child marriage used to be legal in America, and the story of this marriage is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read about. This is 9-year-old Eunice Winstead, and this is her legal husband at the time, Charlie Johns. So on January 19th, 1937, Eunice, who was 9 years old at the time, left her mother's house. On that morning, she told her parents that she was going out to buy herself a new doll. But instead, the 9-year-old was headed to the courthouse to meet her 22-year-old future husband, Charlie Johns. So at the time of this affair, there was no age limit on marriage in Tennessee. I mean, technically, someone could have married an adult and a baby if they paid off the minister and got everything to go through properly. And so on that day, 22-year-old Charlie offered a local Baptist preacher named Walter $1, which equates to around $21 today. And the preacher accepted the offer, came into the church, and married the 9-year-old to the 22-year-old. I mean, obviously, words cannot possibly describe how disturbing images like these are. Now, at first, both Charlie and Eunice's parents disapproved of the marriage, but after some thought, they eventually approved the marriage, and they just allowed them to live together and be married. Now, sadly, Eunice dropped out of school at the age of 9 after her husband, Charlie, pulled her out, and she began giving birth to their children at age 15. They'd eventually have 8 children together. I just cannot believe that shit like this used to happen in America. Comment your thoughts on this below.
In the late 1940s, Soviet researchers locked 5 political prisoners inside a sealed chamber, exposing them to an experimental gas designed to keep them awake for 15 days. They were promised freedom if they endured. But what happened next was far beyond anyone's worst nightmare. At first, the subjects were normal, talking, laughing, and making plans for their release. But by day 3, paranoia set in. Their conversations darkened. They spoke in hushed voices, whispering secrets they refused to share with the researchers. By day 5, the men stopped speaking to each other and instead sat in silence, eyes darting around the room. Then on days 6 through 9, the screaming started. First, just one prisoner screamed, high-pitched, frantic, and endless. He ran back and forth, shrieking until his vocal cords tore apart. The others barely reacted. One prisoner tore pages from a book and smeared them with his own feces, pasting them all over the chamber's observation windows. Then silence came. Not a single sound for days. The researchers panicked. They used an intercom to check on the subjects, and a calm voice replied, "We no longer want to be set free." When they finally reopened the chamber on day 15, what they saw wasn't human. One subject was dead, his flesh torn apart. The others had mutilated themselves, ripping open their own stomachs and pulling out organs, which they placed neatly on the floor as if arranging them like trophies. They had gnawed on their own fingers, their lips torn away in sick, grinning smiles. And when the soldiers tried to remove them, they fought back with inhumane strength. They then strapped the last survivor to an operating table, and he stared into the scientist's souls. As they prepared to sedate him, he leaned forward and whispered, "We are you. We are the madness that lurks inside every mind, waiting to be unleashed."
She thought she'd met an 18-year-old guy online. She'd actually been groomed and was about to be lured to her death. It was 2007 and 15-year-old Carly Ryan was living with her mum in Stirling, Australia. Carly was hilarious, she was really energetic, and she was the entertainer of her family. For 18 months, Carly had been talking to who she thought was her dream guy online on MySpace. Now, this dream guy was apparently 18-year-old Brandon Kane, who was a musician, and Carly thought he was gorgeous. He was apparently from Texas, but was living in Melbourne. Carly really felt she'd hit the jackpot with this guy. They had the same music taste, and they really seemed to have matching personalities. They got on so well. They often spoke on the phone well into the night. In January 2007, Brandon rang Carly up and said he'd love to see her on her birthday, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. But he had a suggestion. He said how about his dad Shane came on his behalf, as he was kind of driving through for work anyway, and he could bring her some gifts off Brandon. Now, this was a little bit odd, but obviously Carly really desperately wanted these gifts, and she kind of wanted to just feel connected to Brandon in any way that she could. So if that was through his dad, then so be it. She spoke to her mum about this, and her mum asked to speak to this guy on the phone and see what the deal was. So she eventually spoke with him and organised for the dad to drop these gifts off. On the 26th of January, Shane showed up at the family home, and he was really very friendly with everybody and was really charming. However, as the evening went on, he was weirdly kind of a bit obsessive over Carly and very clingy with her. Things got weirder when later on it was revealed that the present he'd given Carly from Brandon was lingerie and a nurse's outfit. He announced to the family at the end of the day that he would go and find a hotel to stay in, but Carly's mum felt a bit bad and said, well, you can just stay here in the spare room. However, the following day, Carly's mum expressed concerns. She'd noticed Shane was just behaving really odd and seemed weirdly, like I said, possessive over Carly, and the final straw was when she walked past Carly's bedroom, saw Carly sleeping in the bed and Shane on top of the bed next to her. She told Shane to leave, which he did, but things would get much, much worse. Despite Carly's mum literally threatening to call the police on Shane and stop Carly using the internet, Carly continued to talk to Brandon online. A month went by, and on the 19th of February, Carly told her mum she was off to a sleepover at her friend's house. They hugged goodbye, and it would be the last time Carly's mum would ever see her. Little did she know, Carly was off to meet Brandon. She'd been convinced to meet with him at a secluded beach in Port Elliot. When Carly failed to return home the following day, her mum was frantic. She tried to contact Carly and couldn't get hold of her. She then received a strange phone call off a member of the public saying that they'd found her bag at the side of the road. She contacted police, but tragically it was too late. A heartbreaking call had come into officers that a young female had been found deceased, face down in shallow water. The autopsy revealed she'd been attacked, suffocated, and drowned. There had also clearly been a struggle. The crime scene was littered with broken jewellery that had seemingly snapped off Carly's body. Police decided to look at local CCTV footage to see if there were any clues as to who Carly was with that evening. Luckily, they did find some footage of her walking, and she was with 2 males. A witness also reported seeing a car near the beach around that time and gave police a description. Carly's mum actually told officers about the weird situation with Brandon and his dad Shane and showed them some aggressive emails she'd received off Shane. They knew that this Shane character could potentially be responsible. Police managed to track some phone numbers that had been in contact with Carly and tracked them to a caravan park nearby. They found the car that eyewitnesses had described to police. And they discovered who was staying there and who the car belonged to, and they were stunned. It wasn't Shane or even his son Brandon. They didn't exist. The culprit was 48-year-old, father of 3, Gary Francis Newman. When they arrested him, they found notebooks full of usernames and passwords of aliases that he used online. On his computer were hundreds and hundreds of chats with underage girls. So who was the other person in the CCTV footage with Gary? It turned out it was Gary's 17-year-old son. Had he been made to pose as Brandon? His son was arrested, and Gary denied any wrongdoing. Now, the evidence showed that Gary had viciously attacked Carly, but detectives couldn't confirm whether the son had witnessed it or been involved in some way. Sand from the beach was found in the son's shoes. Gary was eventually given life in prison, but his son was cleared of all of the charges. The son's identity has never been revealed.
After holding in her pee for 3 hours to win a Wii gaming system, this woman tragically lost her life. You see, Jennifer Strange was participating in a bizarre radio contest called Hold Your Wii for a Wii. The challenge? Contestants had to drink water every 15 minutes without using the bathroom, competing for a Nintendo Wii gaming system. Jennifer consumed nearly 2 gallons of water during the contest. Witnesses even remarked that her stomach appeared bloated, almost like she was pregnant due to the excessive amount of water. Despite her efforts, Jennifer finished in second place, winning only a pair of concert tickets. After the contest, she went home feeling unwell and even called into work sick. Just 2 hours later, Jennifer was found dead in her bathroom. The cause of death was water intoxication, a rare but fatal condition where excessive water dilutes sodium levels in the body, causing swelling in the brain. This incident led to widespread criticism of the radio station for not ensuring the participants' safety and for ignoring warning calls from listeners during the broadcast who noted the dangers of such a contest. Several employees were fired, and Jennifer's family was awarded $16.5 million in a wrongful death lawsuit.
Pharaoh people of the Appalachian Mountains, this group of people who wanted to basically live off the land, and they ended up going into the Appalachian Mountains. And then they're also known for being cannibals. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the missing boy, Dennis Martin, he was a 7-year-old, and he was in the Appalachian Mountain region and shit. It was him, his pops, his brother, and his grandpa, and they were off like on a family tradition kind of hike, going camping, and they ended up coming across this other family on the same trail. They had kids as well, right? So the kids came up with a plan saying, let's go further in the trail, let's hide, and then whenever our parents pass by, we jump scare them. So all the kids agreed, and Dennis, he was wearing a bright red shirt, so the other kids didn't want to be next to him because they were gonna get caught easily. So they ended up like separating. He was by himself. The parents ended up coming where they were hiding. They got scared, but then Dennis wasn't coming out, so they started looking around for him. They couldn't find him. Everybody starts panicking, right? The family members start like going crazy searching for him. It ends up being one of the biggest searches. Over 1,400 people ended up volunteering to help. It was from park rangers to regular volunteers, firefighters, police officers, even the military came.
Oh, fuck.
But what they also realized is that since a lot of people were helping, it actually was messing up a lot, because tracks could have been messed up, scents could have gotten confused because of how many people there was, so the dogs had no real leads to like follow. It wasn't until this guy, his name was Harold Key, came out of nowhere on a news article, and he had said that on the same day that the kid went missing, he had seen a man which his kids thought were a bear, and that he was carrying something.
It sounds like it could have.
This man murdered his wife with a chainsaw, left her decapitated body in the street, and escaped America. And to this day, he's never been caught. On April 26, 2010, the police department in Lewisville, Texas received a chilling call. A mailman had called in and was frantic, and he told the dispatcher that he had just found a decapitated corpse of a woman lying in the middle of the street. The victim was Maria Corona, and just before she had been killed, she had been on the phone with one of her best friends. Allegedly, she told her friend that her husband, Jose, was out in the yard making noise with some lawn equipment. She then went outside to check on what Jose was doing, and that's when he began to attack her. Maria's husband, Jose, had been planning this murder for a while. He had prepped the chainsaws the night before, gotten all of his getaway supplies ready, so when his wife walked out of the door that morning, he was ready to kill. According to the police, Jose at the time believed that his wife had been cheating on him. So, according to authorities, he contacted a local witch doctor, or a curandera. According to authorities, this woman gave Jose little vials of perfume and herbs to place around the house to ward off bad spirits, but it's believed that this woman, who's never been identified, may have instructed Jose to kill his wife. After killing his wife and leaving her body in the street, Jose escaped in a vehicle. He then parked the vehicle at a Walmart where another unidentified person picked him up in a pickup. That pickup then brought Jose to an auto dealership. He told someone he wanted to take a car on a test drive, and then he ended up stealing the car. And he eventually crossed the border into Mexico and disappeared. To this day, this is an interesting case because this is considered a solved murder. They obviously know who did it, but Jose has completely vanished. Nobody has seen or heard from him since this event, and it is believed that he is still on the run, living his life somewhere, only God knows where. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife, Courtney, Murder in America, available on all streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Imagine your ex burning your mum alive in front of you. The 999 call from this woman was so horrific that I had to stop listening. Susan Lynch was married to Kieran Lynch for 24 years. They had 2 daughters together and lived in Benfleet in Essex. In old family video clips of them together enjoying holidays, they literally just look like a normal family unit. Susan was super close with her parents, especially her mum. Her mum Jennifer was the perfect nan. She literally was so hands-on and she was always spending time with her grandchildren. She also seemed to get on really well with Kieran as well. There was no bad blood in the family at all. Susan had been just 17 when she actually met Kieran initially. He was slightly older and worked as a bricklayer, and to the outside world seemed like a great partner. He doted on Susan and was eager for them to both get married. When they tied the knot and then went on to have kids, he was also the perfect husband and dad and son-in-law. But Susan described him as Jekyll and Hyde. She described feeling embarrassed and not wanting to tell anyone when he gradually became more and more physically abusive. His daughters also noticed how controlling he was with both them and their mum. His behaviour started to escalate. At first it was raising his voice at Susan, then it developed into throwing and smashing things. This was particularly bad when he'd had a drink. He'd then be really regretful the next day and try and just sweep everything under the rug. Then one day, Susan discovered he had a packet of substances in his jean pocket. It was clear he wasn't just abusing alcohol. Now his behaviour then escalated to an alarming degree. He went from pushing her in the chest and holding her throat to holding a knife at her throat. Susan left him shortly after and said she wanted a divorce. She thought he'd handled it pretty well. It kind of seemed like it was amicable. However, it soon became apparent this wasn't the case. When she asked him if he would pay child support, he said he'd rather have her killed. Susan then ended up making a terrified call to police when one day Kieran turned up at her house with a hammer and started smashing up her front garden. Her voice was trembling as he gradually got closer and closer to the door. She was barricaded inside and desperately told the dispatcher that she wasn't able to lock herself in anywhere. Now, police did turn up to the scene and arrest him, but decided to only charge him with criminal damage rather than making threats to kill. The Crown Prosecution Service argued that the text could have just been hypothetical and this was just a breakup despite the fact that he showed up to her house with a hammer. His bail conditions were to not contact Susan. However, he persisted. He really didn't seem to care about this condition. Susan repeatedly reported to police explaining that he was mentally unstable, he was contacting her, but they did nothing. Kieran also called police himself 11 days after being arrested, stating that he was thinking about unaliving himself. By this point, Susan had moved on with a new partner, Mike, and one evening when Susan's partner was at the house alone, he had a horrific shock. He saw Kieran sneak into the garage. He then cut all of the power off to the house before driving off. Police were again informed. Kieran had started calling Susan up to 80 times a day. It was reported, but he was not rearrested as police said it wasn't particularly risky to anyone. They would end up seeing just how risky it was when it was too late. On the 12th of March 2018, Kieran rang the house phone and his daughter answered. He made threats to her that he was going to come to the house and kill her. Police went to Kieran's house, but he wasn't there. The calls continued late into the night, and Susan and the family were understandably terrified. In fear and following police advice, Susan's daughter went to stay at her nan's house. At 2:18 a.m, she rang police to say that her dad was continuously ringing her and harassing her. He left threatening voicemails, but police apparently didn't have a unit available to be dispatched due to competing demands. The following day, Susan went to visit her mum Jennifer and her daughter left for the day, and thank God the daughter left. Susan's mum Jennifer was in the garden and suddenly and unannounced, out of nowhere, Kieran ran into the garden. In an absolutely brutal attack, he threw petrol all over her before setting her alight. Upon seeing the commotion, Susan immediately rang police and started sprinting away from the danger. She was shouting down the phone to police, begging them to hurry, and can be heard on the recording shouting, "Oh my God, my mum's dead. He set fire to my mum in the garden." Like I said, in the end, I did just have to turn the call off because it was just so emotional. By this point, Jennifer had gone up in flames and Kieran had also set himself on fire. Susan was screaming on the phone, begging police to hurry. She could be heard reassuring her mum and trying to get her to kind of hang on to life. When the police asked Susan what's happened to Kieran, she said he's burning to death in the corner of the garden. Jennifer told Susan she loved her, but she had been engulfed in flames and was now completely bald and burnt. She was airlifted to hospital but sadly passed away 17 days later with her family by her side. Kieran passed away that evening. A domestic homicide review criticised the police and said Kieran's behaviour, quote, amounted to stalking and should have been identified and pursued as such by police. An inquest deemed Jennifer's death unlawful, and Susan said, we miss my mum desperately and just wish things could have been so different to how they turned out.
Whomever coined the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
The longer you stare at this photo, the more disturbing it gets. Okay, so the photo I'm about to show you might be the scariest photo ever. It's just a picture of a normal girl. But the longer you look at it, something disturbing happens. You might not be able to sleep after watching this.
This is the last picture that Sydney Loof posted to social media before she was strangled to death by her Tinder date. The man who killed her was Aubrey Trail, and he claimed when they were doing it, something happened that led to her death. However, him and his girlfriend set this entire thing up to murder this innocent girl. The court found evidence and videos of the couple purchasing bleach, saws, and trash bags leading up to her disappearance. Upon an autopsy, it was claimed that Trail cut Sydney Loof up into 14 pieces after strangling her with an electrical cord, and then dumped her body in various bags and scattered them throughout. Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell, his girlfriend, were convicted of first-degree murder in 2017 for this. Trail was sentenced to death, and then Boswell was sentenced to life in prison. Here's a picture of the tree. There's Loof, Trail, and Boswell all in order. And apparently for this couple, this was not their first time doing stuff like this. They would lure young women off of dating apps and use occult and witchcraft on them during intercourse. It was kind of like a sacrificial lamb type of thing going on here. This just shows the dangers of online, but don't be confused with this. Online and real life can be just as dangerous, if not the same. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
Are you choosing bear or man? If you said man, this case might make you change your mind. Amy Moore was a beautiful and intelligent second-grade teacher from Illinois. She worked at the Grove Elementary School. She was a hard-working and loving mother to 3 boys, aged 11, 12 and 7. Amy and her ex Matthew had recently got divorced. Now Amy was struggling to care for their sons all alone, and she was kind of living paycheck to paycheck. As I said, she was very hard-working and she just was trying to make ends meet so that she could look after her family. Now, tellingly, Amy had to take out orders of protection against Matthew. Tragically, Amy would be failed by the system. On the 29th of May in Normal, Illinois, the unthinkable happened. Matthew forced entry into Amy's home in the early hours of the morning. He confronted her and then shot her multiple times, killing her, before turning the weapon on himself. Amy's brother, Thomas Burns, stated that there had been numerous concerning incidents over the years, and Amy had really tried to protect herself and her family by getting law enforcement involved. Tragically, her 3 sons are now left without a mother. Thomas has since started a GoFundMe, which I'll put in my bio, to help to support the children.
The last thing that I have is sent by one of you guys.
This is a story time. To this day, I still haven't figured out what it was. This situation happened my sophomore year of high school. We lived in this house off of like I-85 in Georgia. A single house on that highway, and there was like a really dilapidated, beat up house like next door to us. Our house had a long driveway. We had these sensors, so if anybody crossed by or any animals or any cars came into our driveway, we would know. It would beep around the whole house. One day my mom leaves. It was me and my brother alone.
A good sign.
It was my bed and the open window against it. By the headboard, it was just a window, and that window peered into the woods. I'm up about like 2, 3 a.m. Brother's asleep, whole house is dark, and I decide, okay, let me just go play some Sims. I lay down on my bed. Let me remind you, windows behind me. I open up my laptop screen to go play some
Oh
Sims.
my gosh.
And in that window, on my life, I could just see the blackness and I saw a face. Like a face clear as fucking day. I'm a skeptical person, but I could see a face. I jumped up. My flight or fight was like I've never felt that in my life, and I felt it that moment, and I ran to my brother's room.
Imagine finding your friend's decapitated body. When this woman did just that, what she screamed was heartbreaking. It was the 2nd of November 2023 in Santa Rosa, California. Luis Gustavo Arroyo Lopez had just been released from prison. He'd spent time behind bars for assault and weapons charges. On the day in question, his nan Elvia, aged 64, was at her home. Her neighbour, Jessica, recalled seeing Elvia greet her grandson at the door and be pleasantly surprised. However, Elvia would soon end up dead. Just hours after the neighbour Jessica witnessed the first initial interaction, she then saw a friend of Elvia's enter the property and run out panicked. She was shouting, "No head." Police raced to the scene where they found the grandmother decapitated in the house. After finding out that Luis had been at the property at around the time of the killing, officers tracked him down and arrested him. It's believed that he murdered his nan in the house and left the scene with her head. The 24-year-old has actually pleaded guilty to killing his nan and will be back in court to be sentenced soon. A motive for the killing at the moment is unknown. Elvia's family stated she was a loving person and she adored so dearly all her grandchildren. She didn't deserve what was done to her.
This one is called Los Clones.
The clones?
Yeah, basically Los Clones was a Mexican television program that aired on TV Azteca. It's without a doubt one of the most strangest, mysterious forms of lost media. There's like so little information known about it, and only because the show was only aired for like about 2 weeks to like a month before it got completely cut. Certain people were saying how maybe it's because of how the dolls that were used in the show looked.
Were creepy?
And kids that have been traumatized with the show and stuff. So basically the show had these puppets parodying famous people at that time. It could be artists, Mexican actors, politicians, and what made it creepy was that the puppets had these exaggerated facial features. For anybody who's scared of dolls, it will give you like a creepy feeling.
I have that feeling, like I hate the way dolls look. Like anything that looks human and shit and is not, bro. Especially dolls with the creepy eyes.
But let me know, guys, if you guys remember this show. Some people remember it like a fever dream, or people just having nightmares about it because of how scary and creepy the dolls look.
Oh my gosh, I don't want to see, bro.
Bueno, tal vez te hice la nariz.
I can't watch this, bro. Why?
Podré cepillarla como le hicieron a tu papito.
El lápiz labial invisible y el palillo de dientes con energía solar.
¿Quieres hacer el amor esta noche? Respuesta equivocada, cariño.
That shit just made me feel mad weird, bro.
Yeah, bro. People say it makes them feel uncomfortable, bro.
OD, like, you know that fight or flight feeling?
Yeah.
That shit's activated right now. Like, I feel weird.
Credit to Senna for discovering this, because I've never knew about this shit.
This is one of the most mind-blowing injuries of all time. Granny Keeley, an Irish woman, endured a life-changing car crash in 2006 when she was 22 years old at the time. She was the passenger in a car that skidded on black ice and collided with a wall. Granny's knees were then propelled into her face due to her feet being propped up on the dashboard. The impact occurred as the airbag inflated at a staggering speed of 200 miles per hour, resulting in very severe facial injuries. Almost every single bone in her face was broken and she suffered a brain leak, known as CSF leakage. Additionally, she lost 2 teeth in the traumatic accident. Following the crash, Granine underwent extensive medical procedures. Unfortunately, due to an infection, doctors had to remove her forehead, leaving her without one for 2 years. However, in 2009, surgeons managed to reconstruct her face by fitting her with a ceramic forehead. Granine humorously joked that her new forehead was made in Italy and playfully referred to it as a designer piece. This is Granine today, and she is now 38 years old, and it looks like she didn't even go through this awful experience. But sadly, she still suffers from long-lasting effects from the injury. She said, "I constantly lose my words while in the middle of a conversation. This can happen to me about 20 times a day." She also said, "I get headaches when too many people are talking around and I sometimes find it difficult to stay focused." So if you learn anything from this video, never ever put your feet on the dashboard of a car that you're in. Because you never know, this can happen to you.
You obviously know what Benadryl is, right? So back in like 2020, there was a where you have to take a certain amount, like a dozen or more, to hallucinate. I don't recommend anybody to like obviously go do it. I'm not saying to go do it, but I'm just saying like people that would hallucinate on Benadryl, it would be bad trips overall. Like they would see spiders, they would see snakes, wasps attacking them. They would hear like familiar voices and unfamiliar voices talking to them, and they would see shadowy figures, and they will also see the Hat Man. Have you ever heard about the Hat Man?
The Hat Man, no.
It's a sleep paralysis demon. So people around the world has seen this motherfucker for like years, bro. Websites dedicated to this, like people talking about their stories, stuff like that. Everybody would describe them the same way too, like a tall 6 to 8 foot person.
Bro, 6
he
to
wears
8
a fedora. You can't really see his face, only like 2 red eyes, and it's always like he's a shadowy figure.
And I remember a supporter actually talking about how they had sleep paralysis and they saw saw a man with a hat outside of the window, bro. And keep in mind the window is like mad fucking tall.
So I do remember seeing a story about a therapist who had like a patient, and he would always say that he would.
This Loki made me even more scared because he was just talking about like a shadow person holding up the fucking curtain.
There's a really strange missing persons case happening right now out of Utah. Let's talk about it. This is 21-year-old Elizabeth Green. She was last seen walking to work along a dirt road in Callio, Utah, which is an extremely remote area in northern Snake Valley. Like, there really isn't much out there, and the area she went missing is roughly 3 hours from any major city. Elizabeth had just started a new job at a remote ranch, and she was walking there that day, but never made it, and it's almost like she vanished into thin air. She was reported missing to the police later that day, and they began looking for her right away. Authorities have searched the area around her home and the ranch that she was going to work at, including the route that she would have taken to get there, but no trace of Elizabeth has been found. Police searched the ranch, which has not been publicly named, just one day after Elizabeth was reported missing, but according to them, they didn't find anything suspicious. The rancher said that she never made it to the ranch that day and that he had no contact with her, so it's left authorities wondering what truly happened to her that day. Police have tried pinging her phone, but they aren't able to get a connection, and they've searched all of her electronic devices, but they've all turned up nothing. There's been no activity on her social media accounts since that day either. Her mom thinks that Elizabeth could have possibly been picked up that day, but she just doesn't know by who. There's also a possibility that she arranged to have someone pick her up, but they didn't show, which could have led to Elizabeth trying to walk through the remote desert by herself. According to her family, she does suffer from some mental health issues and has ran away before, but no matter what, she's always stayed in contact with her family and she's always come back within a day. She would never just up and leave like this. Just based on the circumstances, police believe that she's in immediate danger. Like I mentioned before, Callio is extremely remote and so far away from any major city, so the fact that she just mysteriously disappeared and left behind no trace in a matter of hours is just terrifying. It's now been over a month and Elizabeth is still missing. With the summer weather coming up, we need to find out what really happened to her that day. These are some of her characteristics and what she was last seen wearing. If you have any information about this case, please contact the number on the screen.
When a teenager disappeared with her fugitive boyfriend, people feared she was dead. Absolutely nobody expected what had actually happened. It was April 2023 and Caitlin Coons was living in a foster home in Ohio. She had a history of running away and again disappeared on the month in question. A huge search began for not only Caitlin but her 33-year-old boyfriend. This was Jonathan Jones. Now, Jonathan lived at home with his mum, Nicole, who reportedly disapproved of their relationship. Caitlin was obviously way younger than Jonathan, so understandably Nicole was uncomfortable with this. The search for the pair was an anxious one. Jonathan was actually wanted on child endangerment charges and indecent images. Police also considered Caitlin to be an endangered child. Posts with the pair's faces on flooded social media as members of the public desperately tried to help. Many worried that Caitlin was in harm's way. The following month, though, some apparent good news. The couple had been tracked down, both alive at the Mexican border. However, things were far from over and the case would start to get darker than anyone could have imagined. While the couple were missing, social services had phoned police. They'd received a shocking text from Caitlin's phone. She told the staff she'd killed 2 people and was on the run. It transpired that on the 18th of April, Caitlin had run away from the foster home. She'd made her way to Jonathan's mum's home with Jonathan. Now, Caitlin had resentment towards Jonathan's mum, Nicole. She felt that she was interfering with them being together. Caitlin gave Jonathan an ultimatum: kill his mum or she would kill her. She told him he had 5 hours to take action. He actually didn't, so eventually Caitlin took matters into her own hands. Caitlin bludgeoned Nicole to death with a rock and strangled her. The couple then went to the shop and bought bin bags and cleaning supplies. They horrifically both drove and got some food and ate the food together while Nicole's remains were in the boot of the car. They then drove the remains to some large bins by some apartments. Now, tragically, Nicole's remains have never been recovered and are presumably in landfill somewhere. Caitlin and Jonathan both pleaded no contest to aggravated murder and abuse of a corpse. They were both sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Caitlin argued that she did not send the text that admitted to 2 murders.
We're asleep, and she gets up to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh man, I have to go to the bathroom too, so I'm going to go to the bathroom in the main bathroom outside the room. I go out, I come back in, and I'm like, why'd you turn my light on my side of the bed? Like, it's 12, we're going to bed, like, we're in bed. She's like, I didn't do it, I thought you did. I'm like, okay, well, somebody's trying to get our attention. My phone rings. It's my little sister. She says, hey, Bob, sorry, are you awake? And I'm like, I am now. I go, my light just came on. She goes, that's why I was calling you. She said, is Nicole there? I'm like, yeah. She put her on speaker. She said, Nicole, I don't want to get personal, but did your mom have miscarriages before you? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I'm seeing 3 people in the room right now trying to get your attention. And they're your 2 brothers and your sister that weren't born.
There's actually a dark, terrifying origins to the Amber Alert. This happened in 1996 in Arlington, Texas. And it was a little girl called Amber Hagerman, who was 9 years old. And she was riding her bike at her grandparents' house along with her brother Ricky. Next to the grandparents' house was a supermarket, which was abandoned. Basically, they're riding their bike there, you know, having fun and all. The little brother decided to go back to the house. So she stayed at the parking lot. That's when a black pull-up truck pulled up to her. A man got out of the truck, grabbed Amber, threw her inside the truck, and he dipped immediately. Now, luckily, a witness was able to, see it happen from his backyard. So he called the cops immediately. The cops showed up pretty fast, bro. Like, within minutes. It was pretty fast. So there was a huge search for Amber all over Texas, basically, hoping that they could find her and see who abducted her. Even with all that happening, bro, like, they still couldn't find her. About 4 days later, there was a man who was walking his dog at midnight.
Haven't seen this photo on the internet as of late. This is just moments before 12-year-old Emma Brown took her gun and used it on her father and then herself. Last September, Emma and another 12-year-old friend devised a plan to murder Emma's family and her pets and then run away to Georgia together. Shortly after this photo, she then proceeds to shoot her father in the stomach and then run toward her driveway to take her family car to meet with her friend about 230 miles away. It's believed in this moment that Emma might have panicked and then shot herself in the process. The thing that's raised a concern is, as of right now, Emma's friend, who hasn't been publicly identified, is believed to have planned the entire ordeal. One of the biggest discussions as of late is that Emma's family had no idea how her and her friend had actually met, but she has been arrested and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. Now, the father did end up surviving the incident, but now conversations are being struck throughout the entire internet about whether or not parents know who their children's friends are. The police have also raised concerns and reports blaming social media for this occurrence. So the question now is, was this a preventable incident?
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He was so funny. He would always have me laughing. We used to play this game called Kick the Can, and he was the fastest runner, so we always wanted to be on his team.
Richard's friend Patricia found him kind and caring.
If we wanted to take a shortcut to school, we had to cut through this really tough neighborhood. And he always used to wait for me, sitting on a little pony wall, and then he would walk me to school. It was always safer to be in twos, I guess. He used to sit in back of me in 5th grade, and I remember that he would poke me in the back. And every time he would poke me, I would jump up. And so that time that he kept poking me, I turned around very upset, and I said, hey, stop. And I remember him like slumping over and then just hitting the floor on the side.
He would have seizures. He would be shaking. We knew he was sick.
Third murder, which is the second incident, okay? I'm in the middle of trying to get my record sealed, right? Thursday night, I killed her. I took off Friday. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, took CTO, all right? Dismembered her body, got rid of her body, but kept her head in her hands because they're identifiable. They're highly identifiable. I kept those at the apartment. Okay? That Friday night, Thursday night, I took her. Friday morning, she was dismembered. Friday night, she was disposed of, right? Saturday morning, I left, right? And I wasn't satisfied that I took the head along in the hands, but I couldn't put them someplace that could be sure they would be dug up by an animal or just be somewhere. It's scary going out there trying to bury somebody or dispose of body parts in a community or out even in the boonies where you don't know where you're at and who can come up at any moment. I had some real close calls there where people that come out of nowhere. And if a body's found and they remember this beige-looking car sitting there the night, that's evidence. So it was very, very hard to get rid of this stuff.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
Ted, how did it happen? Take me back. What are the antecedents of the behavior that we've seen? So much grief, so much sorrow, so much pain for so many people. Where did it start? How did this moment come about?
I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. But as a young boy, and I mean a boy of 12 or 13, certainly, that I encountered outside the home again, the local grocery store, the local drugstore, the softcore pornography, what people call softcore. As young boys do, we explored the back roads and sideways and byways of our neighborhood, and oftentimes people would dump the garbage and whatever they were cleaning out of their house, and from time to time we'd come across pornographic books of a harder nature than more graphic, you might say, more explicit nature than we would encounter, let's say, in your local grocery store.
2022, the town of Slaughter, Louisiana, was shaken by the death of 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher. Lacey suffered from a medical condition known as locked-in syndrome, making her almost completely paralyzed. Due to her medical condition, Lacey spent all of her life at home, as she began to develop some degree of Asperger's syndrome. Lacey's parents were her caretakers, although they neglected that responsibility and treated Lacey inhumanely, leaving her to relieve herself on the same couch that she spent most of her life. Lacey's neighbors stated that the last time they saw her in public was 15 years before this incident. At the time of her death, Lacey weighed 96 pounds and had contracted COVID-19. On January 3rd, 2022, Lacey was found dead in a couch covered in feces and urine. It was believed that she was in that same spot for years without being catered to. Her body was covered in ulcers, her hair matted and filled with maggots. Her parents, Sheila and Clay Fletcher, were charged with second-degree murder and detained for the severe chronic neglect. Despite all of this, they pleaded not guilty and were released on bail. Sheila and Clay Fletcher will begin trial on June 19th, 2023.
This influencer's body parts were found in pots of human soup just last month. On the 15th of February, 28-year-old model Abby Choi posted a beautiful photo on her Instagram. She had no idea of her horrific fate less than 2 weeks later. On February the 25th, 2023, police made a horrifying discovery. A splatter-proof makeshift butcher's workshop was found in a rented 3-story home. Inside of the home, they found 2 human legs in a fridge and Abby's decapitated head in a soup pot. Alongside the head, carrots and radishes were also in the process of being cooked. Minced human meat was also found at the scene. In the rented flat, police found a homemade butcher's shop equipped with meat grinders, chainsaws and meat cleavers. Abby's handbag was also found at the scene, including her ID, which helped to identify her. Heartbreakingly, Abby was a mother of 4 young children. Police in Hong Kong have charged Abby's ex-husband, Alex Kwong, his father and brother with the murder. It's alleged that the 3 men rented an apartment where they'd meticulously planned the murder. It's also alleged that the motive for the killing was a family dispute over money. Abby's children are now being looked after by her mother.
Yeah. And you asked me to come here from California because you had something you wanted to say. It is not just an interview with a man who's scheduled to die tomorrow morning. I am here and you're here because of this message that you're talking about right here. You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore pornography, is doing untold damage to other people and causing other women to be abused and killed the way you did hers.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now, and I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography. Yeah.
911, where's your emergency? I just killed someone. 100, Route 46. What do you mean you just killed someone? Exactly what I said. I'm armed and dangerous. Where are you? You know what? I'm armed, I'm dangerous, send the cops out. I'm in a parking lot, I can see from every angle. I will shoot at anyone who approaches the car. Okay. How many people did you hurt? You know, I'm not in a condition to talk. Okay, can you at least tell me what city you're in so I can send the police out there? Mountain Lakes. You're in Mountain Lakes? Yeah. How many people did you kill? Just one person? Just one person. Just one person? I'm reloading right now. I'm going to shoot at anybody that approaches the car. Okay, that's not a problem, sir. I'd advise you not to reload and do that, but... What's your name? You just hung up on me.
10-year-old serial killer. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Mary Bell, and she could easily be one of the most sadistic murderers in history, even though she was only 10 years old. Mary allegedly grew up being abused, and her mother would even sell her to other men at the age of 5. All of this abuse fueled this anger inside of her, and she had to find some sort of way to release it. On May 11th, 1968, Mary Bell was playing with a little 3-year-old toddler, and he mysteriously fell off of an air raid shelter. This was the start of her violent outrage. Just 2 weeks later, on March 25th, the boy Martin Brown's body was found dead inside of an abandoned building. It was later discovered that Mary lured this little boy into this abandoned building and strangled him with her bare hands. 2 years later, Mary then strangled a 3-year-old boy and carved the letter M into his stomach with a razor blade. And then she used scissors to cut and mutilate the body. Mary eventually confessed to this by writing notes because she was bragging about it, and the police arrested her. Here's the crazy thing. She was arrested and released just a couple years later, and today she could possibly still be alive. One of the terms for her confession was that after she was released, her name would be changed and everything. The latest information we have of her is pretty much she had a daughter when she got released, and nobody knows where she's at now. So what do you think? Do you think she should be forgiven because she was a child, or do you think that fire is still inside of her waiting to strike again? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and follow for more videos.
One of the strangest missing persons cases I've ever seen revolves around someone that might not even exist. Let me explain. In 1989, a local Chicago television station called WMAQ was wrapping up their regularly scheduled television for the night, when all of a sudden the audio was cut and the image on screen was changed to a strange missing persons panel. The image of the individual shown was too low quality to make out any details, and no information other than the woman's name, Joanna Lopez, were given. The broadcast wouldn't be too out of the ordinary if it wasn't for the fact that she was never mentioned anywhere again. And when people tried to find her, they found no records of a woman named Joanna Lopez in Chicago, even with police filings. So, who was this woman in the broadcast? And how did a missing persons panel for her end up on the news? Well, when the news agency was asked about the panel, they claimed it was sent by an anonymous person, which leaves us with the most likely answer being that it was a prank or an alternate reality game. And as for who was actually in the photo, the lead seems to be a woman by the name of Rachel Lopez. A photo of her was found in a West Chicago yearbook from 1990, and although she has a different first name than Joanna, the fact that they look so similar and share a last name leads many to believe that she could be the one in the photo. Sadly though, it seems like we may never know for sure, as no one has been able to contact the woman in the yearbook.
2007, Knoxville, Tennessee was rocked by the brutal murder of 21-year-old Shannon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom. Shannon and Christopher were headed to a party on the night of January 6th. When they didn't show up to the party, the couple's friends started texting and calling them, but received no response. Around 11 p.m. that evening, a couple of their friends went to Shannon's apartment to see if they were there. Shannon and Christopher were not at the apartment, and they were unable to locate Shannon's SUV. It turns out that the couple were victims of a carjacking and kidnapping. The couple was taken to a rental home where they were essayed, tortured, and murdered. A witness arrived at work around 12:30 a.m. on January 7th. He noticed that the lights of the rental home were on and the home seemed quite busy for that time of night. The witness later observed a white 4Runner slowly drive by him with 4 men in the car. Another witness stated that they heard gunshots around 1:45 a.m. near the railroad tracks. That afternoon, around 12 p.m., Christopher's body was found near the tracks, wrapped in a comforter. Shannon was failing to respond to calls and text messages all day long. Using the last ping from her cell phone, authorities found her white 4Runner. On January 9th, authorities went to the rental home and found her body in a trash can in the kitchen. There were 5 people who helped commit this sickening crime, 4 of which were convicted to life in prison without parole, and 1 was convicted to the death penalty.
911, what's the location of the emergency? Please help me! Yes, what address do you need help? I'm not on an address, I'm on a road on Myers Road! He's trying to kill me! Which road are you on? Myers Road in Oregon City! Okay, do you have an address? Listen. Be late, come on, get a cop here now! Okay, who's trying to kill you? My husband! He's trying to pick up truck! Okay, what? He's trying to kill me! Come on! And what kind of gun does he have? Ma'am, take a deep breath so I can understand you. Ma'am, I've already got help coming. I need you to tell me wire and what? On plan. I'm on plan. Wire. Just a minute. I'm walking. He shot me. Okay, you're on fire at Glenview Court? He shot me. Okay, where did he shoot you? In the chest. In the chest? He's over there.
Baby Burger, uno de los casos más traumáticos, atroces y perturbadores de la Deep Web. Todo comienza con una cámara de seguridad apuntando hacia una calle, en donde se observa a una mujer que va caminando con su bebé. Sabemos que es una bebé, porque la madre dio su declaración a la policía de lo que pasó aquella vez. Después, se observa que un automóvil llega y 2 sujetos salen rápidamente. Uno de ellos toma a la mujer y la empuja, mientras que el otro sujeto toma a la bebé y la mete dentro del automóvil para así escapar. La toma del video continúa en un bosque. Los sujetos aparecen con un pasamontañas, para no ser identificados. Proceden a sacar a la bebé del automóvil, para llevarla a lo más profundo del bosque, hasta llegar a un lugar donde hay una mesa muy grande. El otro sujeto procede a traer un aparato, el cual en este momento del video está cubierto por una tela amarilla. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé y la coloca en la mesa, para empezar a abusar de ella, en un terrible acto donde escuchamos los gritos que son desgarradores. El volumen del video sube exageradamente, provocando la risa de uno de los sujetos. Después, procede a darle algunas bofetadas, a lo que comienza a sangrar de la boca. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé de los pies, el otro, toma el artefacto quitándole la tela amarilla. Vemos que es una máquina para triturar troncos de árboles. Encienden la máquina y el sujeto posa frente a la cámara, dejando caer a la bebé. La cámara hace un enfoque a la caída de la bebé en dicha máquina, a lo que ésta se llena de sangre, igual que las camisas de los 2 sujetos. Finalmente, la cámara enfoca a la carne molida que sale de la máquina, para que los dos sujetos comiencen a comerla.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked round her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her 2 friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m, one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and claimed that they were really annoyed because Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum Diane a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m, her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the tracks. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved.
This is Japan's youngest murdered at only 11 years old. Nevada murdered her best friend.
I honestly think this is one of the most interesting and messed up cases ever. And if you haven't heard about this case, click in that video and she'll give you the gist of what happened. When I first heard about this case, I saw every video, read every article about it. Anything I could find, I saw it or read it. And after so much research about it, I found some things that not a lot of people know about this